There seems to be a lot of confusion about what's happening with the US electric grids right now. So this week, electric utilities have been shutting off power to some people's homes and businesses to save energy. Since I worked as an electrical engineer for a utility for 5 years, I figured I'd try to shed some light on the issue. So I did what any good engineer would do and did a little research. Question number one, why are we having rolling blackouts? Utility companies are performing rotating outages, also known as rolling blackouts, to keep the electric grid stable. There's very little actual energy storage in the grid, so what is generated needs to be balanced with what is used at that time. Otherwise, the system will become unstable, and that's bad. To protect from this system instability, the grid operators have different levels of energy conservation. For example, SSP, the grid operator here in the Midwest, has 3 levels of energy conservation, and they call them EEA1, EEA2, and EEA3. EEA1 is the least serious, and EEA3 is the most serious. In EEA1, there's enough power to meet the demand, but it is getting close to an issue. There's not quite enough margin of safety between how much power actually could be generated on a moment's notice and how much power is being used at that time. At this level, large industrial companies who signed a contract to agree to be shut off in situations like this, those large industrial customers may be shut off at this stage. In EEA2, the grid operator tells utilities to ask their customers to lower their power usage. For example, the utility may ask their customers to lower their power usage by turning down the thermostat a few degrees at least and limiting usage of large appliances like clothes dryers and washing machines and dishwashers, for example. Basically anything that consumes a lot of power. In EEA3, the grid operator will ask the member utilities to perform these rolling blackouts and shut off power to certain blocks and certain neighborhoods in 30 minutes to 90-minute intervals and just rotate around who is without power. So question number 2, how exactly will shutting off the power at someone's home save energy? Won't the heater have to work harder to warm it back up again? Absolutely. So home loses heat slower as the temperature difference between the inside and the outside is lower. So during the time that the temperature difference is lower, that's where the actual energy savings comes from. Also, other devices like TVs, lighting, and so forth don't have to use extra power after the power comes back on. So there's a little more energy savings there. All right, question 3. Why are we in this situation? We're in this situation for 3 reasons. Tight gas supplies, unprecedented energy demand, and low wind conditions across the Midwest. So why the tight gas supplies, and why does it matter in my home? Natural gas comes from natural gas wells, which are just pipes that are drilled down into the ground that bring up the natural gas from underground, where it's brought to the surface and refined and shipped off to your house, and pumped to your house, I should say. Natural gas from the ground typically has water vapor in it as an impurity, and as this comes up from underground where it's fairly warm from geothermal heating, of course, when it gets close to the surface and up to the surface, and when it's cold outside, this water vapor can freeze in the pipes at the surface and block the pipes. This is called a freeze off. So most people know that natural gas is used in homes for heating the air, for cooking, and water heating. What a lot of people don't know is that a large portion of the electric usage in a house is actually coming from natural gas. What many people don't know is that natural gas is actually used in many power plants to generate electricity. These cold temperatures have caused a lot of people's furnaces to use a lot more natural gas to heat their homes. So question number 5, why are people picking on wind generation so much when there are other energy generation sources? This is a good question. Like many things, you can't just summarize this whole problem into, oh, it's all the wind's fault. The problem goes deeper than that. As I said before, the grid doesn't store much energy, so the power generated has to equal the power consumed. There are many different resources or generation types that can respond at different rates to power needs. The quickest responding generation comes from natural gas. These units are typically called peaking units or natural gas peaking units because they're used to respond to the peak energy usage and rapid fluctuations in energy usage. Generation sources like coal and nuclear can be changed, but it takes much longer to change the power output than it would for natural gas. And renewables such as wind and solar cannot increase their output, but only decrease their output because they're at the mercy of things like clouds and actually how much wind there is. So when fluctuations happen with wind and solar, natural gas has to be used to balance the grid. This relationship between wind and natural gas is very important. Power output from wind generation has been extremely low this week. It's been about 3% of its capacity in the Midwest. Part of this is because the wind just hasn't really been blowing in much of the Midwest. And also in places like Texas, they weren't expecting these extremely cold temperatures, so they've had a lot of problems with ice forming on the turbine blades of the wind generation. And that's a problem because those turbine blades have to be very well balanced because they spin very quickly. Otherwise, this load imbalance can vibrate the tower as the turbine blades spin around, and it can actually shake itself apart. So natural gas has to pick up the slack from wind, and as I said before, the natural gas reserves are already dwindling. So I hope you see that the problem isn't just, oh, it's all wind's fault, oh, it's all natural gas. It's actually a combination of the two issues together that actually are causing these issues. I hope I answered any questions you have. If you have more questions, be sure to put them in the comments below. And politically charged comments will almost certainly be ignored.